Hey there, great to see everyone. I'm glad that you tuned back in. And Lettie is here. I'm going to invite her back. So Lettie will be here in just a second. Hey there, Theo. So great to see you. Theo is the most awesome intern ever. Hey there, Lettie.
Hey there. That reminded
I
me
am
of
back.
good. That reminded me of did you watch the Jill Scott and Erica Badu versus session?
Yes.
Yes, it was like we was just getting ready to sing Tyrone and she just cut out. We was like, where did
I know. See, that's what happens when you have all these high energy people.
she go?
The
Ooh,
high energy is
Second
like the
City
text, like,
Choir.
I can't take it. I can't take it. Um, but yeah, no, this has been truly awesome. And, I want to just sort of recap, again, what we were saying, reminding people to listen to that still small voice, not always the loudest voice, to find that space of silence, to do their body check ins, look at their strengths and how to build from there. And then ultimately just knowing that you do have a wellspring of information within you. Um,
Yeah,
and I really
yeah.
like that example you gave of like you're kind of walking on the ground floor, but your higher self is like above the buildings and can see, all the things that are happening in different directions that can be a guide. And I just think that's so helpful and so insightful.
Yes. I mean, it's you know, I guess it's just really a blessing to be able to, have a deeper understanding of yourself. Like we are the most powerful beings. We are more powerful than the systems that are around us, which is why those systems are in place to try to distract us from how powerful we really are. And so you've got to think, why was this wisdom driven underground? Why was the wisdom of the divine feminine, of, being able to access your intuitive or your subconscious through tools like, divination and oracle and, different tools that can enhance your intuition and your intuitive ability. Why is it that we aren't, more people don't know that you have neurons in your heart called sensory neurites, or a whole system in your gut, called the enteric nervous system, that is communicating constantly with your brain. Why is it that our society or our culture is structured around things that destroy your gut and the biome that's in there that is communicating, right? Like why don't we know this stuff? Why isn't it what's taught in school? So ultimately you have to love yourself enough to understand the vehicle that you're rolling through life in, right? If anything, I really hope that the pandemic and everything around it can bring more people home to the wisdom of their bodies, how it functions, how it works, because this virus is weak. It's super weak, if you're strong, so make yourself strong physically, and there's one to come to it, and it's like magic, just in being who we are. So I just want to leave that love. I mean, self-love is more than just giving yourself bubble baths and, treating yourself and whatever. Like loving yourself is really understanding, like, how does my nervous system function? How does my endocrine system function? How does my intuition function? What does it feel like for me when I'm interacting with the world and I'm overwhelmed? Like, why am I overwhelmed?
Hmm.
How can I return to a state of centeredness and groundedness, instead of feeling all over the place, being curious about that, because one person holding center and holding space can impact everybody else around them. because that's the highest vibration, that's the highest frequency. So that's the other thing about how do you protect your energy. You protect your energy by being really clear about the signal that you're sending out. High vibratory frequency, then it's going to raise up everybody else around you. And then those low
Mm-hmm.
vibes won't even get to you, because they'll entrain up to you. So
Right. Well, that is so awesome. Thank you, Lettie. I appreciate it. I do want to ask if anyone has any questions as
yeah.
we prepare to clear out. I know we had a couple questions there, but if you have any questions, you want to take a second to kind of think about it. Lettie, while they're thinking about that, can you tell us just a little bit more about the Goddess Ministry and just
um
what it entails, and
yeah.
exactly what is kind of celebrating the goddess?
Celebrating the goddess is this recognition that as human beings, we are both we present as both feminine and masculine. Like they're the part of our human design, this part of us that is animating this physical body, that leaves this body and leaves it here and goes someplace else, right? The energy within us that is neither created nor destroyed, it just changes forms. That part is androgynous. It is a union of masculine and feminine. And what has occurred on this planet, which is this travesty that we have to rectify, is that the feminine was suppressed. The feminine was suppressed in the collective, through all of these customs, designed to relegate the feminine to enslavement or property, basically. These ideas that diminish the feminine also is impacting those that present as masculine in their human form, that in the form of cutting off of emotions, and the understanding, the boys don't cry and all that crap, right? So you've got to realize that whether you're presenting as feminine or masculine, the collective psychology of the diminishment of the feminine is impacting our relationship with the planet, our relationship within ourselves, our relationships with one another, and that has to be healed and resolved, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
requires you to turn away from the old conditioning and the old programming that keeps that status quo in place, that the feminine is less than, it gets paid less than, it's not protected, all of the isms and the things that we see in the collective that we know have been placed there systemically, and is crumbling right now, right? So this relationship with the goddess is really tapping into the wisdom that has been preserved despite the very concerted effort to suppress and destroy it, right? So there's wisdom. The goddess ministry, what I do with the goddess ministry is to educate, to inform, and to embody the archetypes of the divine feminine in her light and her shadow. Because the other thing that has been lost over time is just the understanding is that, we are both light and shadow. There is a polarity within us as human beings, just like the polarized ends of a battery, positive, negative, right? Charges. It doesn't mean good, bad. It just means the presence of or the absence of, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
so, in that understanding that we carry both, then what the enlightened next step is a sacred union of the masculine and feminine within us, a harmonization. And when we can have that within ourselves, then we can create that externally by collective agreement, that it's not smash the patriarchy so that the women are in charge. No, it's about a sacred union between the masculine and feminine in the world, because right now it's out of balance. The only problem with the masculine being in the world the way that it is that it's out of balance, right? And that there is a key component that the feminine brings, a lens and a direction that the feminine looks at in harmony with the masculine that creates the wholeness. Right? So we're, you
Right.
know, it's like trying to fight with one hand tied behind your back. Why? You don't have to, you know? And so that is really, you know, the conversation that I want to put forward. The majority of what I was doing with the Goddess Ministry was in person. You know this, you've sat in circle with me. I would have gatherings, mostly of women, but also I've had some co-ed circles with women and men together, you know, holding space for people to explore what their divine feminine looks like. And it would go through the lens of the 13 archetypes of the feminine, how they present through various cultures. You know, for example, the Great Mother archetype is the archetypal energy of mothering, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pregnancy, birth. It might end in a human being, but it also might be a business. It might also be a book. You know, the energy of Great Mother is that energy of nurturing. She shows up in the African diaspora as Yemaya. She shows up in the Native American indigenous tradition as Pachamama. She shows up in, you know what I mean? It's like all these different
Mm-hmm.
cultures had their understanding of that Great Mother archetype. And it's not just Great Mother. So there's, you know, all these ways that the feminine shows up, and this is what she looks like in her enlightened state, and this is what it looks like in her wounded place, in her shadow. And by being able to understand it and name it, then you can orient it within yourself and heal it and bring it into balance and harmony. And that just enhances every part of your life, your business, your relationships, your relationship with yourself, all of it, right? It's the missing ingredient. And so that's what I'm about, is really putting that out in the world and trying to figure out how to do it online now versus in person.
Well, I
So
think you're
I'm
doing
glad to
it. I
do
think
this.
you're doing it. Yeah. And so someone asked, were we going to post this? I am going to save this live. Absolutely. Ross going to post it on YouTube. And Lettie, we absolutely want you to come back. We did have a question, though. It's kind of a heavy
Oh,
question.
oh,
Uh, and
good.
the, and the question was, how do you define God and your relationship to it?
Okay. Um, I understand God as, you know, there is an intelligence that is everywhere present, right? It's everywhere around us. So think about this. You put a seed in the ground, uh, you put it in the dirt, put some water on it, and the sun shines on it, and it grows into whatever that thing is, right? There's an intelligence to that that has absolutely nothing to do with me. Planets are rotating, spinning, you know, galaxies, universe, all these things. Um, I don't do anything with that. It just is. It functions and moves in patterns that create geometric shapes, that, you know, I can look and, you know, in a slice of the human body and look at my lungs and recognize that the air sacs in my lungs look just like grapes, and grapes on a vine. And, you know, and there's other ways I can look at a branch of a tree and the leaf pattern and recognize that it's the same thing reflected inside of me. There's an intelligence, there is a design to things that has absolutely nothing to do with me influencing it. It's just here. You know, how I can be a body of however many trillion cells, but they all know how to work together and do these things independent of me, right? So God to me is that field where all of this intelligence is arising, and that it's not a person, it's not you know, it's not an entity or a being. It is the isness that is. It is all that is, and everything is in it, right? So we are in it. We are in God. God is everywhere present. It's closer than my neck vein, is nearer than my hands and feet. It is breathing me. You know, it is where I came from. It's where I go to when this body returns to dust. It just is. It is energy. It is light. It is intelligence. It is information. It is love, right? It is everything, and everything is in it, and that's how I see God. I don't, I think it's been such a perversion to make God in the image of man. It's not that. It's not that. We get to be as much of God as we can, but we are not. Like we have as much of it as we can. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and we have another question. Talk about super heavy questions. The question is, what is our relationship to ancient Kemet? And
Ooh.
how do you connect with that? And I think that's kind of you're probably one of the perfect persons to ask because you actually had an experience around some of this. So I don't know if you
Man.
want to share some of that, but at the very least, you can talk about what is our relationship to ancient Kemet in your perspective.
Man, when I went to Kemet, to Egypt, back in September, um, it was life transforming. I think that Kemet, ancient Kemet specifically, is, right now it's like a multi-dimensional realm. It is a realm that exists in another dimension that has all this energy and information and codes present there. And you have to attune yourself to that particular frequency to download, or I would say upload yourself into the consciousness that was left behind. Kemet is like the ancient future. Like everything that they did in that present moment for this future that we're living now. 10,000 years ago, thousands of years ago. It is the seed capsule of the entire knowledge base for humanity, right? It is the origination point for civilization as we know it. It is the seat of every kind of description and understanding of how this universe works, not just on this physical three-dimensional realm, but on the fourth dimension and the fifth dimension and all the other ones beyond it. And it was beautiful that we can affirm that these people were in they were in relationship with the sun in a way that we haven't even explored yet. So it's like the sun loved them, they loved the sun, and it was just that oneness of that beauty and richness of that blackness. Woo! And so yes, to me, Kemet is everything, and everything that you ever wanted to know about life, and that so much has been displaced, misplaced, or lost, but it's still accessible. But you have to go into another dimension of reality inside of your consciousness to access it, and it's possible.
Well, this is so awesome. If there's any other questions, please post them and just let us know as we get ready to just sort of recap a bit. And I want to ask you, Lettie, is there anything else you want to share that you want people to know about intuition, about your experience, about the goddess?
I, I've been doing a lot of, inside of trying to make sense of what's happening in the world, starting to recognize patterns and ways that we have been conditioned to not create our own narrative. So what I would say is to encourage people to continue to craft your own narrative, question everything, question everything. Don't take, you know, run it through your body, and to determine truth from falsehood within yourself, because there is um, a spiritual warfare going on, and the battle is for your mind and for your consciousness. It's to keep you in a place of forgetfulness of exactly how powerful you are to transform the way reality shows up. And so the only reason why we have the reality that we have right now is by collective agreement. And if we withdraw our consent and withdraw our agreement to what's happening and what's not working for us, all of these systems of oppression will disappear. And they know that, which is why there are whole systems built to keep you distracted, to keep you confused. But you don't have to be confused. You can actually discern within yourself, your mind, your intuition, and your body is all that you need. You don't need anything from anybody else, really. But that's determined by how deeply you can tap in and turn inward to really see clearly, to be open and receptive to what's possible beyond anything you've ever experienced about yourself and about the world and about your life. Now's the time. Like, so many people are waking up, but what does it mean to wake up? When you wake up, you really understand that there's way more to life than what's streaming through our news feeds, what's going on in the world, what appears to be true. There's something way beyond that, and get curious about it and go exploring. Create your own narrative, and don't get caught in narrative warfare, because every thought can be weaponized. Everything, whether it's your intuition, the most godly, highest vibrationally intentioned thing, can be turned into a weapon. Don't get baited. Don't get caught in these arguments online. You don't have to do that.
Resist.
Resist.
Well, and we have another question, and the question is, how do non-binary people fit into this construct of the God and the goddess? And I think I can answer part of that. I think it's important to understand that God and goddess really symbolize the masculine, feminine aspects of ourselves that are universal, and that you described as inherently androgynous. But when you say masculine and feminine, we're more or less talking about your thinking nature, your feeling nature. We're talking about your emotions, you know, in addition to your logic. I mean, you're talking about your conscious mind and your unconscious mind and how those two interrelate. And those interrelate regardless of how you show up or how you choose to express yourself. It's irregardless of the body that you're in. It's irregardless of, you know, sexual orientation. It doesn't have anything to do with who you choose to love or how you express gender-wise. And I think that it's just sort of it's kind of important to recognize that we're all connecting to the God and goddess aspect of ourselves, and that God and goddess aspect is universal. But that's just my explanation. Lettie gives like super dope explanation.
No, I mean, I agree 100% with everything you just said. You know, that our sexuality expression occurs, you know, it occurs on a spectrum, you know. And so non-binary to me is just meaning that you're more closer to that God essence in a lot of ways, that you're expressing that. And so we have terms for things now that we didn't have before, but really, you know, regardless of where you fall on a sexuality spectrum, you know, when you're really, you know, true to yourself, then, you know, it doesn't matter what you call it. You're just that pure, that clarified signal that you're sending out of this is who you are. And it's all your God self. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's all your God self. You know, we are human and divine. And so the only thing that we end up pushing against intellectually are the constructs that have been laid out by traditions that decided to divide, to conquer us. You know what I mean? Like, you know, we say that, oh, this presentation of sexuality is bad, or this presentation is the only one that matters, or the only one that's holy, or the one that's normal, or whatever, when there are cultures that recognized 5 different genders. You know, like, there are indigenous cultures that acknowledged people and actually not necessarily deify, I don't think that's the right word, but, you know, they had an elevated status for those who were able to present in a non-binary fashion. that was elevated, that was uplifted, that was celebrated. You know what I mean? So we have to recognize that we're in a stage now in the information age, and where we're going into a more galactic culture, that the space is wide open for all of the possibilities of expression inside of these human bodies, and that we, are in this process of unlearning. We have to unlearn, we have to deprogram, we have to uncreate, the things that have been propping up these systems. Because like I said, these systems are only around because of collective agreement. Think about how everybody was so against gay marriage or marijuana, legalization, and now through collective agreement, everybody's like, yeah.
Right.
Whereas
Things
it was
things
like,
really do shift.
right. It was just like,
But
no.
but
Now it's like, yeah, now we can, you can have, Bruce Jenner, who was like a decathlete, be celebrated on the cover of magazines as Caitlyn now. And some people are grumbling about it, but there's a whole generations that are like, you know, yeah.
right. No, it's completely transformative. And I think that's so like important to acknowledge. I think one of the strengths in this time is adapting, being open and receptive, and then acknowledging that different people express in different levels in different spaces. And all of that is interconnected because it's people who are, whether you want to say we're spiritual beings and we're in this human space, however you want to look at it, I think that it's very clear now that we're all very interconnected. And
Yeah.
that, we have to acknowledge our interconnectedness. We have to acknowledge that we are part of this human family. We are we interconnected to other forms of life, animals, plant life. We're all sharing. And to think about our role, think about how we want to express, and how to really, envision a world where we can value all of those things, and in valuing it, manifest that today. And that's why we're talking about intuition. So I really just want to thank everyone for uh, coming in, and I want to thank everyone for selecting intuition as our topic. And I want to thank you, Lettie, for being so fantastic. And you have a book.
Oh,
You have a
yeah.
book. So
Yes.
tell them about your book.
Well, I'm in a co-authored book project called Sacred Body Wisdom, Igniting the Flame of Your Divine Humanity. I wrote a story in there, an essay about rising like a phoenix, basically. Is recounting this horrific health crisis that I lived through and was able to rise on the other side of it. It talks about, going from being that quintessential strong Black woman archetype, to having, this medical error that almost killed me, and then to have to recover all the way up from there. And the recovery wasn't just physical. It had to be complete. I had to rise back up emotionally, mentally, financially, physically, all of it. So that's the story. I have another book. So I've got two books in the works. One is another co-authored book, but my publisher, she likes to just, put collective stories out there. It's called Sovereign Unto Herself. And I'm telling a story about how I took a 9-year journey to understand my chakras and let my intuition guide me to when it was time to move from the root chakra to the sacral chakra, to the, up through each one, and how that transformed my relationship with myself as a free and sovereign being, distinct from who I was taught that I was. Um, so I'm excited about that. And then at some point this year, my publication date got moved, but I'm writing a book called Galactic Living, and I'm teaching how you live in higher cycles of time. So
I know, and that's what I want to bring you back on to talk about, galactic time and your insights there. That's going to be so fun. So, Lettie, everyone can follow you on at Goddess Ministry, and then your talks that you do on Facebook. Where should they follow you on Facebook?
Facebook is also a Goddess Ministry.
Awesome.
And so I had done a 28-day living in galactic time series. And so I brought you through all of the 13 creation codes and all of the 20 galactic archetypes. And so so I'm on a little bit of a break there, getting some other writings out into the world and published, and then I'll be back on there with another cycle of time that we can move through. But mostly I do a lot of lunar cycle work, moon gatherings, and so putting those out there and promoting those for folks to show up. Right now we're in development, a collaborator of mine trying to get a co-ed circle, right, where the men can sit in sacred space together, because women, we tend to gather like that almost effortlessly. We tend to just link up, but we want to also create a space for the masculine to be able to rest in that sacred space also. So that's one of the things I'm working on, so keep an eye out for that.
Fantastic. Well, we had a visitor from Brazil. Thank you for coming on. And so thanks again, Lettie. This has been amazing. You're always awesome. And like I said, I do want to bring you on to talk about galactic living. I think people will be really excited about that. You are great and fantastic. And you can follow Lettie on at Goddess Ministry and hear more from her. And thanks again. And I'll be talking to you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Bye.